All right, so let me just do a quick follow-up before we move on to another subject. And I'm using this to just make 2 points to tie up some loose ends that I've been elaborating on over the past 3 videos, 3 or 4. And they may seem obvious, but I just think it's important to make them explicit so that we're not misunderstood or they're not overlooked. So let's just keep in mind that by embracing an evolutionary understanding of non-duality, so this is point number 1, in doing that, we have to realize that we are talking about an evolutionary model in which consciousness is understood to be primary, in which it is understood to be the fundamental ground of the reality of our cosmic and individuated and polarized existence. So I'm thinking in terms of people like Bernardo Kastrup. I don't endorse, because I'm a personalist, a divine personalist, I don't endorse his naturalism. What I am endorsing is his overall view of what he calls analytical idealism. That's the name of his position, where consciousness is everything, right? Consciousness literally constitutes everything that exists. So matter, in other words, does not have its own existence. It doesn't have stand-alone existence. Matter is just the particular form or configuration that consciousness takes in our plane of existence. And in other planes of existence, matter may be less dense and finer and subtler, etc. So there are different levels of consciousness. Consciousness, the way in which we experience consciousness at the material level has everything to do with frequency and vibration and the whether the vibration is higher or lower in a given dimension. And we can say the same for thinkers like Donald Hoffman, who has his view, which he calls conscious realism. I don't think I've compared his view with Kastrup's enough to be able to say if there is substantial disagreement between him and Kastrup. I feel like they developed their views independently, which is why they have different names for their systems and use slightly different analogies. But I think that all in all, they are probably saying more or less the same thing. And then another woman I would recommend, someone like Annika Harris as well. Look those 3 people up on YouTube and listen to their stuff. They can be difficult, they can be pretty intellectual, very philosophical and highly scientific, but if you can read between the lines, even if you can't understand them at a technical level, it makes for some very fascinating listening, or reading if you want to read their books too. The second point I want to make is, again, I have to reiterate it because I've made this point earlier in the series, but as we have new people joining, I wish everyone would listen from the beginning, but not everyone does that. So I want to say that as a personalist, I believe God is constituted by a plurality of aspects. So 2 things in particular: he has an infinite body, but he also has a spirit, which I've given the Greek term nous, which is the same term that is used in Neoplatonism, but not necessarily to describe the same thing that I'm describing. By nous, I'm talking about the mind of a personal God, which is characteristic of a human being as well. So a human being imaging that personal God also has this dual character of a body and a spirit, but both of which are integral and necessary to being a person. So a person, by definition, has a body and a spirit. And that spirit, so we don't just have a body and a mind and a brain and so on that is made up of pure consciousness. We have something very specific called a nous, or a spirit, or a mind, that qualitatively distinguishes us from the animals. We're not just distinguished from the animals in terms of having, quote-unquote, more consciousness or having a, quote-unquote, higher level of consciousness. What distinguishes us from the animals is that we are aware that we are aware. We are conscious of the fact that we are conscious. And that is indicative of having a faculty that is qualitatively different from what an animal has. So instead of thinking of God I think of God as Shiva Shakti, or masculine and feminine, as having a masculine and feminine polarity. But unlike in, say, Kashmir Shaivism, which is a Vedic school or Hindu school of philosophy, unlike where they say Shiva is pure awareness or consciousness, and Shakti is the power of pure awareness, I view Shiva as more specifically nous, or mind, or spirit, and Shakti as the body, consciousness itself. Power, consciousness. So rather than in Kashmir Shaivism, where pure awareness is equated with consciousness, and then Shakti is power, I would say Shakti is consciousness, which is power, which is body or material reality. And Shiva is one step removed from that, which is something more specific. It's the faculty of having a nous, or having a mind, or being constitutive of spirit, which is this higher faculty of perception. And that higher faculty of perception in a human being is also what enables us to acquire what we would call self-realization, a kind of union with God, but a union that does not cause us to lose or have our individuality dissolved within this undifferentiated one. We may rise to higher levels of being, to higher levels of consciousness, acquire higher levels of knowledge, acquire a certain level of power and sophistication, but we always maintain our individuality, and we always have a body. It may be very fine or very subtle. It may be as subtle as matter is capable of being, but will never rise higher than that, because to rise higher than that is to actually lose yourself, to lose your identity or individuality. And we don't need, individuals don't need to lose their individuality or their individual identities in order for God to be non-dual awareness. God does not lose anything or become diminished in some way by manifesting the realm of individuality. He doesn't cease to be non-dual. He is non-dual in many different ways, shapes, and forms. Non-duality can take many different shapes and forms and states. So that is what makes me, in that regard, a little bit more of a Sufi or even a Kabbalist, because many Kabbalists say that as well, that you don't have to give up your individuality to acquire a divine union with God. In fact, not only do we not have to, we won't. We can't. Because God has always been manifesting and creating, and so we are as integral to his nature, since he has to experience finitude, as he is to our nature, because he is our source and the origin of our being as individuals. All right.